Hello, I'm Hannah and welcome to my podcast, Don't Tell Me to Relax, the antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm a fertility acupuncturist and educator, and this podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and your fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex education at school, with the aim of helping you improve your reproductive health and increase your chances of conception. Welcome back and welcome to episode 4. Today we're going to be talking all about the follicular phase of your menstrual cycle. So the follicular phase is defined as the time from when your period begins to when you ovulate. And it's the first half, I guess, of your menstrual cycle, if this was a football match. It's all about your follicular development in this part of your cycle. So the ovaries have a number of follicles on, and during this part of the cycle, the FSH, which stands for follicle stimulating hormone, is produced by your pituitary, and it is signaling to the ovaries to grow the follicles. And what happens is one of those follicles becomes the dominant, bestest follicle with the egg that is most likely to be fertilized. There's a process of natural selection that actually goes on, and that follicle becomes the dominant follicle and is then released under the influence of luteinizing hormone, which spikes just before ovulation. And the egg is released, hopefully, if you're trying to conceive, to be fertilized. So the follicular phase is also, as well as being dominated by FSH, it is also dominated by that all-important hormone, estrogen, which many people who have a menstrual cycle might notice is a good hormone, because they actually call it the happy hormone. And estrogen is linked to producing serotonin, happy hormone, like higher levels of estrogen is linked to producing more serotonin. So it really is like or it can be the feel good part of your cycle, or the feel good hormone. So Katie, tell us, which is your best half of your cycle, or best bit of your cycle, and how is estrogen for you?
Oh, I love it. Big fan.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, like really big fan.
Yeah.
Once my periods stopped and like energy's kind of like restored a bit, I can really, for me, around day 5 of my cycle is really when I'm start to be like, okay, I'm like ready to be out in the world. I have a lot more energy, like exercise is easier.
Yeah.
What else happens? Just like my brain is just more in gear, like just feel like everything's firing like quicker or like more smoothly. Sometimes I can find I'm like way more productive during that time, just feel like more able to do stuff without it like stressing me out, and just like, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Whereas like I'm a few days away from a period at the moment, and compared to like 2 weeks ago, I'm not like doing the same amount of stuff, but like I'm leaning into that, and it's all right, but it's definitely different from one part of my cycle to the next.
And that's a really good thing, isn't it, about when you learn about your cycle and cycle tracking, is about how to live your life according to what stage of your cycle you're at.
Yeah, like it's a really great thing to tune into. And I mean, you should be able to do most things at any part of your cycle. You don't want it to be influencing you so much that you're like, I'm unable to do X, Y, Z when I'm like on my period. And that's what we were talking about in the last episode.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of like biohack your way and like doing things at points in your cycle that are really gonna like lend in your favor. So like lots of athletes get their personal best around ovulation.
Yes.
Because like your muscles just, everything just works better with, like when estrogen's peaking.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, you know, doing things like this, like recording the podcast, I am in the first half of my menstrual cycle. Are you? Yeah, so I know that this is a good time to do it. Whereas, like you, if you're, you know, you're pre-menstrual, it's harder, isn't it? It's harder to kind of be out in the world and to do things that are kind of like more challenging, I think, because I think estrogen really helps you cope. It's a good coping.
Yeah, it's good,
hormone.
Like confidence booster, isn't it?
Yeah,
like definitely. Like I know, I'm just able to do more when I'm in that first half of my cycle. Like if like today I had something that was just very casual on this morning, and we had this afternoon, that's all I've got on. And I mean, I'm very lucky that I work for myself, and I can plan my days like that according to my cycle. which is really great. And I think most people, once you get your head around it, to some degree can like lean into this way of living. Like lots of people call it cyclical living, and that's like leaning into where you are in your cycle and just trying to make things a bit easier for yourself, even if that is the case of like, I'm on my period, I'm not going to exercise today because
I love that. I love that when I'm on my period, and I think it's not an excuse, because it's not an excuse, but you know, sometimes you have that kind of battle with your own brain about getting up, should I exercise, all that kind of stuff. But I do genuinely feel like when you're on your period, it's okay to get up and think, you know what, rather than get up and smash it out at the gym, I'm going to spend half an hour extra in bed having another cup of tea, listening to six music or whatever it is that, you know, brings you joy. It's a good message to give to yourself, and good permission to allow yourself.
Definitely.
But we're at the first half of our cycle anyway. That's where what we're talking about today. And estrogen is important for making us feel good, making us feel more positive. It also helps with building up the uterus lining. So we were talking about that in our last episode, about you want a nice plump uterus lining for any potential embryo to be fertile, so it can be implanted into that lining to begin your pregnancy. And also estrogen is really important because it is linked to making cervical mucus, which, you know, is a topic close to our hearts. Also
a big fan of cervical mucus.
And so estrogen, as your estrogen levels rise at this part of your cycle, it signals to the cervix to start making your cervical mucus. And so this is the time when, if you're tracking your cycle to conceive, when you start to see your cervical mucus, it's a good time to know that you are potentially fertile. So Katie, I'm handing over. Tell us, do a cervical mucus 101 for us.
So first things first, it's just amazing. And you need to like get to know it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be embarrassed by it. Like, it's such a good sign that your hormones are in a good place. And it's basically like a natural ovulation predictor kit, like these strips that people buy to tell them if they're ovulating, which we'll talk about shortly. But cervical mucus is, so as Hannah was saying, produced by your cervix. And when you start to get used to observing it and like understanding what it should look like, so fertile mucus tends to be quite stretchy, clear. Maybe it's a bit kind of like streaky or white in colour, but that clear, stretchy, egg white type mucus is like what we really want to be seeing. And when you see that, it means you're approaching ovulation, and this is like your prime time to be having sex, particularly if you're trying to conceive. So it's like knowing when your fertile window is. So we often talk about the fertile window, and your cervical mucus is just the clearest way to start to understand that. And cervical mucus is so brilliant because it helps to keep sperm alive inside of you for up to 5 days. It can filter out poor quality sperm. So if there's some sperm that isn't like top notch, it will stop it going through the cervix and up into the uterus. So then just the best swimmers are getting through, basically. It's just crazy. And it changes the whole like pH balance of your vagina. So when you're not producing cervical mucus, your vagina is far more acidic, but when you're producing cervical mucus, it's more alkaline. It's the same kind of balance then as sperm. So again, just like matching everything up to make it the best environment for conception to occur in. So we mentioned about ovulation predictor kits. So they can be useful, but we really prefer people to be looking at their cervical mucus as their prime way of knowing when they're approaching ovulation and using that to understand when the best time to be having sex is. So ovulation predictor kits work by you pee on a stick, and then you get a positive result if there is a surge in luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone is the hormone that causes ovulation to happen. But when we get that surge and you get the positive on the stick, it means ovulation is likely to happen in the next like 24 to 36 hours. Remember, they're predictor kits. It doesn't mean ovulation is happening right now. So they can be useful, but I know, Hannah, you've got some information about like people having less sex if they're using ovulation predictor kits. I don't know if you want to kind of explain that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There have been some studies that have shown that if you use ovulation predictor kits and you use these to time your sex, if you're not having sex at any other time and you're only having sex, you know, when you get in the peak, it could be that you're not having enough sex, or that B, because you're having less of it, there is less chance to conceive. So obviously, the more sex you have in your fertile window, in terms of the, you know, if you're waiting for an ovulation predictor kit, your fertile window is probably only going to be 2 to 3 days. Whereas if you're using your fertile mucus, it's highly likely that that window is going to be about 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, depending on how many days that you have it for. And statistically, if you have more sex through your fertile window, then you have a better chance to conceive. So sometimes relying on the OPKs means that you can start too late or you can miss it. And we know that your most fertile day is actually the day before you ovulate, because you want to have that sperm waiting for the moment that the egg is released.
Ready to go. Because once that egg is released from that follicle, no one really knows, but we think that it survives for about 12 to 24 to 36 hours. It's not long, is it? It's really, really not long. I don't even think it's 36 hours. I think it's 12 to 24, yeah.
So really, it's, you know, if you've not got sperm there ready and waiting, then it's, you know, it's very easy to miss. And every hour that passes, the quality of that egg could be declining and therefore reducing its ability to kind of be fertilized. So the day before is really, really important. And that's why, you know, that we talk, lots of people ask us, how much sex should I be having? And I would say that from when your period finishes, as soon as you start getting cervical mucus, or even if you're concerned about, you can't find your cervical mucus, if you have problems tracking it, when your bleeding finishes, if you start having sex every other day to when you think you ovulate, then I think it's covered the fertile window. And lots of people think that they have to have sex every day, but every other day statistically is proven to be enough because of this amazing cervical mucus that keeps your sperm alive. Yeah. And also there is always this kind of balance between too much sex. So if you're having sex every day, it might be that there's not enough time for the sperm to regenerate, because sperm is continuously made in the body. And if you're ejaculating too often, it could be argued that it's not enough time for the sperm to be good, to be at its peak performance quality wise. And on the flip side of that is if you're not ejaculating regularly through your cycle. So, you know, lots of people have sex through their, you know, especially if you're using OPKs, have sex when they get the flashy, smiley face, and then they stop having sex. And then what happens is that if you've not got pregnant that cycle and you go into your next cycle, if you've not ejaculated enough, that sperm has been sitting there kind of degenerating. It's not the best quality. So we always talk about frequent ejaculation through a cycle, whether you're having sex or not, is a really good way of making sure that when you are having sex in your fertile window, it's the best sperm it could possibly be. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to just say something, Katie, about like how to look for your cervical mucus? Because one of the number one questions I get asked is, how do I know I'm producing it? I can't find it. Does this mean I'm not producing it?
So the way I teach clients to check for their cervical mucus, it's really simple. So just getting some tissue paper and getting into the habit of checking. So I say checking. What I mean is wiping across your vulva, so your external genitals, before and after you've peed, and then just checking what's on the paper, and if there's something that you can pick up and finger test, so that's something you can like pick up and like sort of play with between your fingers, then that's fertile mucus. So you don't have to be internally checking for your cervical mucus. I think sometimes that can confuse people because they're like, oh, well, if I put my fingers inside my vagina, then my fingers come out and there's something on them. It's like, well, your vagina is always going to be wet. So I think that can cause some confusion for some people. Whereas if you just get used to doing this wiping method, basically every time your pants are down, just having a wipe with some paper, and one, that helps to form the habit if you're doing it as often as you can, but then also it means you're doing it throughout your cycle. And that means you'll be able to observe the difference between the days that you're dry and you're not seeing mucus, so the days you're not fertile, and the days that you do see mucus and being like, cool, that's my fertile window. They're the days that we want to be having sex.
Great. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's just about checking in, isn't it? It's something that if you've never been taught before, if you don't really know what to look for, then, you know, it's not a surprise that so many of us have spent years and years and years being totally unaware that this was even a thing, or that there was a way that you could, you know, like, tune into it or spot it.
Or thinking that there's something wrong with you because of it. Like, it's, I said this at the top of the episode, but like, it's a sign that you're really healthy. Like, having cervical mucus is a good thing.
Yeah. And it's statistically proven that if you understand fertility awareness and you use it, then the time to conception is shorter. So there's really amazing evidence for it. And it's free.
Yeah, ovulation predictor kits can be really expensive.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they can be expensive, and I think they're great for some people.
Yeah,
and, you know,
there's a time and a place for everything, right?
Yeah, I don't want to, like, you know, be like hate on OPKs, as the kids would say. But they are expensive, and they do provoke a lot of stress and anxiety for lots of people.
I don't know many people that use them and find it like a stress-free experience.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of people, it's like a daily reminder that you're on this kind of fertility train, and that, you know, are you not? Why aren't you? Should you be? Have you missed it? Is the kit working right? You know, there's a lot of variables, aren't there? Whereas I think
and then like the last thing you probably want to do at that point is have sex.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I know I speak to a lot of clients about, of like, they're just like, just like sex becomes a chore, and it's like, it shouldn't have to be. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And also the other thing that's important to talk about at this point in our cycle, so the follicular phase is what we're talking about, is that this part of the cycle is important that, you know, we look at all the areas that can impact it, because this follicular development can be really impaired or improved by what is happening lifestyle wise. So we're just going to go through some of the big things that we think can really impact your follicular development and your hormone production at this point in your cycle. So Katie, do you want to talk about, were you going to talk about exercise?
Yeah, so exercise is an interesting one. As with everything, we want to have exercise in our lifestyle, but we don't want too much of it. And it's definitely something can often see with a lot of women, where they're like really over exercising, where they're doing like HIIT workouts every single morning, and that can create, like, in like small amounts, it can be a positive thing. But if you're really like overexerting yourself on a, like, more than like 4 or 5 times a week, like even less than that, maybe depending on the time you're doing these things, it can have a really big impact on the cycle, just because then you're using a lot of your energy stores on like your muscle development, or like just keeping you going throughout the day, rather than your hormones having a chance to kind of keep on track. So we do want you to be exercising. Like, sweating is a really good way to kind of detoxify estrogen from the body. Like, we don't want too much estrogen hanging around, but you don't want to overdo it. I see so many clients that think that like cycling miles to and from work is not part of exercise, and then they're doing like multiple crazy intense classes, and then they're like, I haven't had a period in 6 months. I'm like, you might want to check in on that. So it's finding a balance with it. And also, like, there's lots of resources you can look at about like exercising like with your cycle. So doing more, I think it's like strength training around the time that you're ovulating, and then doing like kind of lower intensity stuff in the luteal phase. And you can actually still get like incredible results if you lean into these different parts of your cycle with your exercise. Yeah.
And I think the thing is, isn't it, it's to really, you know, as we always go back to, if you're tracking your cycle and you've been tracking it for a while, you will learn if any of these things are having an impact. So if you, I know lots of people I've worked with who go on kind of like high HIIT, you know, low diet, you know, like
low calorie diet,
before they get married. You know, there's like this sort of 6-month program of, like, it sounds like pure torture to me.
Yeah.
And what people will say is that during that time, their period stopped, or they became more irregular, or their period got lighter. Something often changes with their menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So if you're tracking your cycle and you know that, then you can see that the impact it's having. Because the other thing to say is if you're doing this exercise and it's not impacting your cycle,
it's different for everyone.
Crack on, because everybody's different, and there's no right or wrong. But we're just saying that exercise can absolutely impact your follicular development and this phase of your cycle.
Well, like in a past life, I was a dancer, and the amount of people I know that when they were like actively dancing and like that was their career, like didn't have periods, and that was largely down to the like insane amount of exercise they're doing all day every day. So like it's just noting these things down as you're tracking, and like Hannah was saying, if it's not impacting you, then like great, keep doing what you're doing. But if it is, then like take a few cycles to like re-establish a new routine and see what works for you.
And sleep is another one I think that can really impact this part of your cycle. So most people would always say that they sleep well. You know, if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily get impacted by insomnia, then most people sleep well during the first half of their cycle. But and most people experience insomnia problems that are cycle related probably when they're premenstrual. That's what I see mostly in clinic.
Me too.
But if you are having sleep problems for whatever reason during this part of your cycle, then it absolutely can impact your hormone production, because the hormones need dark, it needs a regular amount of time, and it needs the kind of uniformity and regularity of that circadian rhythm to really support your metabolism, which supports your menstrual cycle. So, you know, good sleep in a dark room at a regular time really, really, really impacts your hormone production, your follicular development, your estrogen levels, all of that is a big thing.
There's some research about, I mean, this is about the luteal phase I'm about to say, but there's some research about sleeping in a dark room can potentially lengthen the luteal phase, which is just dark, and our bodies love routine, so get into a bedtime routine. And
the other big one is diet, because you were going to talk a lot, because I know this has had an impact for you yourself.
Diet and protein intake. So again, kind of sort of on a similar vein to the exercise, I feel like socially women are told to move more and eat less, and it's like, please do the opposite. Please eat more and exercise in a way that works for you. But generally speaking, what I see a lot of in clinic is people thinking that they're eating like quote unquote healthy, but they're eating either like very small amounts of food, and it might be like a cucumber salad or something, and there's like virtually no protein in their diet, or like very low amounts of protein in their diet. So in the last year, I've kind of switched to a much higher protein intake, like probably like double if not triple what I had before. So it was a lot more, which can be like an adjustment to begin with, but oh my goodness, you can see a massive difference in your menstrual cycle because of it. And then with that, like we were saying, estrogen's like the happy hormone, you might have more energy. If you're supporting your body through diet, nutrition, getting enough protein, fat, carbohydrates, like we need carbohydrates as well, your hormones just have a chance to work properly, and you'll feel so much better for it. You'll have more energy, you'll probably be sleeping better with that, your like brain will just be working better. Like eating to support yourself and getting a really like well balanced diet, and like a good way to think of a balanced diet is sort of having like half of your plate is like green leafy vegetables and like other types of veg, a quarter of your plate being protein, and another quarter being carbohydrate. So that's quite an easy visual way to look at how to like create a balanced meal without getting into like weighing your food or anything like that. I don't think that's helpful for a lot of people, but significantly upping your protein intake will have a really positive impact on your follicular development.
Yes. And I guess all of these things, I mean, I was going to talk about stress, like stress on the body and how that can impact this part of your cycle. And I guess what I've realized just talking to you now is that all of these things, you know, exercising on a regular basis, but not too much, sleeping well, eating well, all of these things signal to your body that you're safe and you're looked after. And so they're a real antidote to stress, aren't they? Because you know, if you are stressed or you're exercising too much or you're not sleeping well or you're not eating enough, then you're signaling to your body that it's not safe. And therefore, one of the first things that happens when your body thinks that it's not safe is it shuts down its reproductive system, because it's like, hang on a minute, it's not safe, it's not secure, it's not a good time to reproduce. We don't need to reproduce to survive.
No.
So
it's like not an essential system of the body, like breathing or keeping your heart pumping
or your digestion, but I always think that the reproductive system is the one that kind of goes first or gets shut down first,
definitely,
when the body's under any kind of stress, whether that's actual stress or stress from a knock-on of not sleeping or not eating well. So all of these things really do feed into that safety, your body knowing that it's safe, because if it feels like that and it's being nourished and cared for, then it will, it's more likely to ovulate.
Yeah, 100%. It's really, I think everyone knows stress can impact them in various ways. And I think once you start to tap into tracking your cycles like this, it can be quite clear the effect stress can have on your cycles.
Yeah. And it's the thing, isn't it? Because lots of people say, does stress cause infertility or does it cause fertility issues? And it's, I don't think there's any, lots of people say yes, it does, and lots of people say no, it doesn't. And I think it's never a clear, straight line, is it? Because it's always a bit of a roundabout line.
Yeah, there's so many factors.
You have to look at it in context to everything else in life.
Yeah.
Because lots of people are stressed, and lots of people have stress in their life that's ongoing. But I guess if you can support the other areas that we know can impact your health and your fertility, like eating well, sleeping well, these are like antidotes to that stress. So it's not always as simple as stress causes fertility issues. It's like you have to look at everything in context to all the other things that can impact it.
Yeah.
Great. So we've done a very quick gallop through the follicular phase of your menstrual cycle, which is obviously, we talk about this all the time. Each phase is an important part, and each phase has a knock on to the next phase. So this is all about the build up to ovulation, and ovulation is really the main event of your menstrual cycle. Yeah. So in terms of 3 things to remember, what are your top 3 things to remember, Katie, for the follicular phase as a roundup?
So the importance of lifestyle factors, so all the things we just discussed there, and how they can have a really positive impact on your follicular development when you're really like nailing these things. The importance of your cervical mucus and getting to know and understand that, knowing that your cervical mucus is really key to understanding when you are fertile, and that's your optimal time to try and conceive. And then with that, the importance of sex and like when to time that, how often you need to have it, knowing that you don't have to have it every day, and every other day is absolutely good enough, and the day before you ovulate is actually the time you're most likely to conceive.
Yeah, and just before we go, I would say, if you see cervical mucus, have sex, and if you don't, then and you don't want to have sex, because sometimes the sex for trying to get pregnant can become really not great for lots of people. I always say, if you see mucus, have sex, and if you don't and you don't want to, then don't, and keep it as simple as that. So on that note, I will love you and leave you, and we look forward to tuning in next week.
Cool. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have learned something helpful about your reproductive health and your fertility. If you would like to find out more information, then please come and join us in our free community on Facebook. We have tons of resources, access to our webinars, we do live Q&As, and it's a chance to connect with other people who are trying to conceive. The link to register is in our show notes, and we hope to see you there.